The fluorescent lights of Terminal 3 cast harsh shadows across the polished floor as 6 security officers formed a tight circle around him. Marcus Richardson stood perfectly still, his heart pounding against his ribcage like a war drum. His hands were visible, his breathing controlled, but inside, a familiar dread coiled around his chest like a python. "Sir, we need you to come with us. Now." The words hung in the air like an executioner's blade. Around them, travelers stopped mid-stride, phones emerging from pockets with the speed of gunfighters in the Old West. Marcus could feel their stares, some curious, some judgmental, all of them reducing him to a single narrative they'd seen play out 1,000 times on their screens. He'd done everything right. First-class ticket. Tailored suit. Calm demeanor. But none of it mattered when you wore his skin in America's airports. What happened next would be captured on 17 different cell phones, uploaded to social media within minutes, and viewed by millions within hours. But those videos wouldn't tell the complete story. They couldn't capture the childhood trauma that made his hands shake. They wouldn't show the years of military service that taught him to keep his voice steady under pressure. And they certainly wouldn't reveal what was inside the leather wallet in his jacket pocket, the one item that would transform this confrontation from a viral moment of injustice into something nobody could have predicted. This isn't just another story about racial profiling at an airport. This is about assumptions, identity, and the dangerous gap between who we appear to be and who we actually are. Because when Marcus finally revealed his ID, everything changed. The officers' faces went pale. The head of security began apologizing profusely. And the entire airport learned a lesson they would never forget. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where this really began. The journey before the storm. Marcus Richardson had learned to navigate airports the way a ship captain learns to read storms. With caution, preparation, and the understanding that danger could strike without warning. At 42 years old, he'd accumulated enough frequent flyer miles to circle the globe 3 times, yet each security checkpoint still made his pulse quicken. Today should have been different. Today was supposed to be triumphant. He'd spent the last 6 months in Seattle, working 18-hour days on a project that would culminate in this moment, flying home to Atlanta for the biggest presentation of his career. His carry-on contained nothing but a laptop, a change of clothes, and a leather portfolio holding documents that represented years of work. Everything was by the book, organized, legitimate. The morning had started perfectly. His Uber arrived on time. The traffic flowed smoothly. He'd even grabbed his favorite coffee from the airport Starbucks, a small luxury he'd promised himself for getting to the gate early. Marcus took pride in being early, in being prepared, in giving nobody any reason to single him out. But he'd forgotten the fundamental rule: preparation doesn't protect you from presumption. He was walking toward gate 47, checking his boarding pass on his phone, when he noticed them. 2 security officers, standing near a pillar, watching him with that specific kind of attention that made his stomach drop. Marcus had developed a sixth sense for these moments. The subtle shift in body language, the way eyes tracked him differently than they tracked others. He kept walking, maintaining his natural pace. Don't speed up. Don't slow down. Don't give them anything. "Excuse me, sir? Sir!" Marcus stopped, turned slowly, his face arranged in what he called his polite neutral, not smiling too much, could be seen as suspicious, not frowning, could be seen as aggressive, just calm, open, cooperative. "Yes, officer?" The first officer, a middle-aged white man with a military haircut and a name tag reading Brennan, approached with his hand resting casually on his belt. Behind him, his partner, a younger woman named Officer Hayes, spoke into her radio. "We need to ask you a few questions," Brennan said. His tone was professionally neutral, but Marcus could hear the undertone, a presumption of guilt waiting to be confirmed. "Of course. Is something wrong? Where are you traveling to today?" "Atlanta. I have a boarding pass right here." "I didn't ask to see your boarding pass yet, sir. I asked where you're traveling." The rebuke was subtle but deliberate. Marcus felt the familiar heat rising in his chest, not anger exactly, but a cocktail of frustration, humiliation, and fear that he'd learned to suppress years ago. Atlanta, Georgia. For a business meeting. What kind of business? Around them, other passengers flowed past like water around a stone, some glancing over, most determinedly avoiding eye contact. Marcus recognized the look, relief that they weren't the ones being stopped, mixed with a voyeuristic curiosity about what would happen next. I work in technology consulting. I'm presenting to a client tomorrow morning. Brennan's eyes narrowed slightly. Technology consulting. What exactly does that mean? Before Marcus could answer, Hayes returned, and Marcus caught the subtle headshake she gave her partner. Whatever they'd been checking, whatever they'd expected to find, hadn't materialized. But rather than de-escalating, Brennan's posture stiffened. Sir, we're going to need to examine your bag and verify your identification. May I ask why? It was the wrong question. Marcus knew it the moment the words left his mouth. You never ask why. You comply, you document, you survive, and you complain later. That was the protocol he taught his own nephews. We have reasonable suspicion that you may be carrying prohibited items. Based on what? Based on our security protocols, sir. Now I'm asking you nicely. And I'm complying nicely. Marcus interrupted, his voice still calm but with an edge now. I simply asked what gave you reasonable suspicion. That's my legal right to know. The tension ratcheted up instantly. Hayes took a step closer, her hand also moving to her belt. Brennan's jaw clenched. Sir, you're being uncooperative. I need you to. I'm asking a question. That's not uncooperative. That's exercising my constitutional rights. Looking back, Marcus couldn't say exactly when the situation metastasized from uncomfortable to dangerous. Maybe it was his tone. Maybe it was the small crowd that had begun to form. Maybe it was just the collision of two men's egos in a system designed to eliminate nuance. But suddenly, there were more officers. 4 became 6. 6 became 8. They formed a perimeter around him with practiced efficiency, and Marcus found himself at the center of a human cage. Hands where we can see them. They are visible. They've been visible this entire time. Do not reach for anything. I'm not reaching for anything. Marcus could feel his throat constricting. This was how it happened. This was how routine encounters became tragedies. One wrong move, one misinterpreted gesture, one nervous officer with a weapon and a narrative already written in their mind. He thought about his sister, who would get the phone call. His mother, who had buried too many friends' sons. His nephews, who would see this video and learn that doing everything right still wasn't enough. Around them, at least a dozen phones were now recording. Marcus could see the little red dots of live streams, broadcasting this moment to audiences who would dissect every second, every word, every gesture. Some would defend him. Some would find reasons he deserved this. Most would simply consume it as entertainment, another video in an endless scroll of American injustice. Sir, final warning. Place your hands on your head and get on your knees. The head of airport security, a stern-faced man named Daniel Patterson, had arrived. He was older than the others, with gray temples and the bearing of someone who'd been doing this job for decades. His presence shifted the energy, not toward de-escalation, but toward official action. Officers, what's the situation? Subject is refusing to comply with security screening. Demonstrating hostile behavior. Possible 10 to 33. A 10 to 33, emergency, officer needs help. Marcus's blood ran cold. They were escalating, creating a narrative that would justify whatever came next. I'm not refusing anything, Marcus said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. I asked one simple question about the basis for this stop, and it escalated to this. Patterson studied him for a long moment. Marcus could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, the same calculation that happened in encounters like this across the country every day. Believe the officers, or believe the suspect? Protect the institution, or protect the individual? Sir, these officers have a job to do. If you'd simply cooperated. I have been cooperating. Cooperation doesn't mean surrendering my right to ask questions. It does in a secure area of an airport, Patterson snapped. Now you have a choice. You can come with us voluntarily to a screening room, or we can detain you and involve TSA and local law enforcement. Your choice. It wasn't a choice, not really. Both paths led to the same destination, a small room with harsh lighting, invasive questions, missed flights, and the permanent stain of being flagged in the system. But Marcus had been in situations like this before, in different contexts, in different uniforms. He'd been a soldier once. He understood chains of command and strategic retreats. I'll come voluntarily, he said quietly. But I'm going to need to call my attorney. You can make your phone calls after screening. I'm entitled to. You're not under arrest, sir. You don't have those particular rights in this context. Now, are you coming, or are we escalating this further? Marcus felt the walls closing in. This was the trap. Cooperate and submit to an unjust process, or resist and become the aggressor in their narrative. There was no good option, no path that preserved both his dignity and his safety. He was about to agree to go with them when a woman's voice cut through the tension. Excuse me, what exactly is happening here? She was in her 60s, white, well-dressed, carrying a designer purse and radiating the kind of authority that came from a lifetime of being listened to. She stepped into the circle with the confidence of someone who'd never been told she didn't belong somewhere. Ma'am, please step back. This is a security matter. I can see that. I'm asking what this gentleman did to warrant being surrounded by 8 armed officers. Patterson's expression tightened. Ma'am, I need you to move along or you'll be detained as well for interfering with airport security. I'm not interfering. I'm observing. As is everyone else here. She gestured to the crowd, which had grown to nearly 50 people, all recording, all watching. And I'm quite curious why this well-dressed man with a boarding pass and a coffee is being treated like a criminal. We have reasonable suspicion. Of what? Traveling while black? The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Patterson's face flushed red. That is an absolutely inappropriate accusation. Then explain the reasonable suspicion. Because from where I'm standing, all I see is racial profiling. Marcus wanted to tell her to stop, that she was making it worse, that her privilege might protect her but it wouldn't protect him. But another part of him, the part that was tired of staying quiet, of strategic retreats, of surviving by making himself small, wanted her to keep talking. More voices joined hers. A man in a business suit. A young couple with backpacks. An elderly black woman who pushed through the crowd to stand beside Marcus. This is shameful, the elderly woman said, her voice trembling with anger. This boy hasn't done anything wrong. The situation was spiraling out of control, but in a different direction now. Patterson looked around at the growing crowd, at the phones, at the viral moment unfolding in real time. Marcus could see him recalculating, trying to find a way to maintain authority while containing the PR disaster. Fine, Patterson said finally. We'll make this simple. Sir, I need to see your identification. Just your ID. That's all. Marcus reached slowly for his wallet, every movement deliberate and visible. His hands were steady now, the fear transmuted into something else. Resolve, maybe, or just exhaustion with the entire performance. He pulled out his wallet, expensive leather, a gift from his sister last Christmas. Inside were the usual items, credit cards, a photo of his nephews, a receipt from dinner 3 nights ago. And tucked behind his driver's license, a second ID card. Marcus had been reaching for his license, the simple compliance that would, maybe, end this encounter. But his fingers brushed against the other card, and something made him pause. He thought about his nephews watching this video later. About every other young black man who'd find himself in this same situation. About the pattern that would repeat endlessly unless someone broke it. He made a decision. Instead of his driver's license, Marcus pulled out the other ID and held it up for Patterson to see. The head of security took it, glanced at it casually, then looked again. His expression changed instantly, eyes widening, color draining from his face. "Oh my God!" he whispered. The revelation. Patterson stared at the ID card in his hand as if it might explode. Around him, the officers leaned in to look, their expressions shifting from aggressive alertness to confusion to dawning horror. "Sir, I didn't." Patterson's voice trailed off. "Didn't what?" Marcus asked quietly. "Didn't know? Didn't expect? Didn't think someone like me could be someone like this?" The ID card was simple but unmistakable, a federal badge identifying Marcus Richardson as a decorated colonel in the United States Air Force, currently serving as a senior Pentagon advisor on cybersecurity infrastructure. Below his photo were security clearance codes that made Patterson's airport credentials look like a library card. But it wasn't just the rank or the position. Clipped to the badge was a second credential, one identifying Marcus as the recipient of the Distinguished Service Cross, the second highest military decoration for valor, awarded for his actions during a classified operation that had saved the lives of 43 service members. The woman who'd first spoken up pushed closer to see. "Oh my God!" she breathed. "You're the Marcus Richardson? The one from the Damascus incident?" Marcus didn't respond. He kept his eyes on Patterson, watching the man's face cycle through emotions: shock, embarrassment, fear of consequences. "I need you to understand something," Marcus said, his voice still calm but carrying an unmistakable edge of authority now. "I didn't show you this to make your day worse. I showed you this to make a point." Patterson opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Colonel Richardson, I am so deeply sorry. If we had known..." "If you had known, you wouldn't have stopped me," Marcus interrupted. "That's the problem, isn't it? The calculation you make about whether someone deserves respect, dignity, and the presumption of innocence depends on what's in their wallet. Not on their actual behavior, not on whether they're breaking any laws, but on their credentials, their rank, their ability to cause problems for you." Around them, the crowd had gone silent. Phones still recorded, but the energy had shifted from outrage at injustice to rapt attention at the unfolding confrontation. Officer Brennan, who'd started this whole encounter, looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him. His partner, Hayes, had taken several steps back, her face pale. "Sir, we were following protocol," Brennan began. "What protocol?" Marcus's voice rose slightly, the military command tone emerging now. "The protocol that says a well-dressed man with a boarding pass and a coffee requires 8 armed officers. The protocol that treats a simple question about reasonable suspicion as hostile behavior? Walk me through that protocol, Officer Brennan. I'm genuinely curious." Brennan had no answer. Patterson held out the ID like it was burning his hand. "Colonel, please, if we could just move this somewhere more private." "No." The word cracked like a whip. "We're not moving this somewhere private so you can manage your PR disaster away from cameras. We're having this conversation right here, right now, in front of all these witnesses, because this needs to be witnessed." Marcus took his ID back and held it up for the crowd to see. "This is a federal badge. It gives me security clearance that most people in this airport will never have. It represents 23 years of service to this country, including 3 combat deployments. I have advised presidents. I've helped prevent cyber attacks that could have crippled our national infrastructure. And today, I was surrounded by 8 officers for the crime of walking to my gate." He paused, letting that sink in. "But here's what you all need to understand. I'm not special. I'm lucky. I happen to have the right ID in my wallet to make this stop. Most people who look like me don't have this particular get-out-of-jail-free card. They're teachers, engineers, accountants, students, law-abiding citizens who get subjected to this same harassment, and don't have a federal badge to make it stop." The elderly black woman who'd stood beside him earlier was crying now. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saying it." Marcus turned back to Patterson. "You want to know what reasonable suspicion you had? I'll tell you. I'm a 6'2" black man with a carry-on bag. That's it. That was your reasonable suspicion. You saw my skin color, and you saw a threat. That's not..." Patterson started. "Don't." Marcus's voice was steel now. "Don't you dare insult my intelligence by pretending race wasn't a factor. I've been flying for 20 years. I've been stopped more times than I can count. White colleagues with the same bags, same destinations, same everything. They walk past security without a second glance. This isn't random. This isn't protocol. This is pattern, and it's systemic, and it needs to end. Patterson looked around at the crowd, at the phones, at the witness to his department's failure. Colonel Richardson, I want to assure you that we take these concerns very seriously. We'll be conducting a full review of this incident. A full review, Marcus repeated, a bitter laugh escaping. Let me guess what that review will find. The officers were following their training. No explicit racial bias can be proven. Maybe some sensitivity training gets recommended. Nothing fundamentally changes. Am I close? The head of security said nothing, which was answer enough. Marcus felt the adrenaline starting to ebb, exhaustion creeping in to replace it. This was the part that never made the viral videos. The bone-deep weariness of having to justify your existence, to prove your humanity, to defend your right to simply exist in public spaces without harassment. I have a flight to catch, Marcus said finally. Am I free to go, or are you going to detain a Pentagon advisor and deal with the phone calls that will follow? You're absolutely free to go, sir. And again, I apologize. Your apology means nothing without change, Marcus interrupted. But I'll tell you what I am going to do. I'm going to file a formal complaint with the TSA, with the airport authority, and with my contacts in congressional oversight. I'm going to request surveillance footage of this entire encounter. And I'm going to make sure that everyone in my network knows what happened here today. He looked directly at the officers surrounding him. You all signed up for this job to keep people safe. I respect that. But keeping people safe doesn't mean treating entire demographics as presumptive threats. It means using actual evidence, actual behavior, actual reasonable suspicion, not skin color as a proxy for danger. Officer Hayes, the younger woman who'd been Brennan's partner, stepped forward. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and her voice shook when she spoke. Colonel Richardson, you're right. Everything you said is right. And I'm sorry. I've been doing this job for 3 years and I've watched. I've watched us stop people who don't deserve it. I've stayed quiet because I'm new, because I need this job, because... Her voice broke. That's not an excuse. I know that's not an excuse. But I want you to know that not everyone is okay with this. It was the first genuine acknowledgement Marcus had heard. He studied her face and saw real remorse there, real recognition of the harm caused. Officer Hayes, he said, his voice gentler now. If you're serious about that, then don't just be sorry. Be the change. Speak up next time. Question the stop before it escalates. Use your voice to protect people, not to participate in a system that harms them. She nodded, tears streaming down her face now. The crowd around them was enormous now, over 100 people, all watching this moment. Marcus could see phones everywhere, capturing every angle. By tomorrow, this would have millions of views. Think pieces would be written. Cable news would debate it. And probably, inevitably, nothing would fundamentally change. But maybe, just maybe, the next time someone like Officer Hayes saw a colleague profiling someone, she'd speak up. Maybe some of these witnesses would recognize their own biases and question them. Maybe some young black kid watching this video would see that you could stand up for yourself, that you could demand dignity even in systems designed to deny it. The woman who'd first spoken up approached Marcus as the crowd began to disperse. Colonel Richardson, I'm Rebecca Walsh. I'm an attorney with the ACLU. If you're willing, I'd like to help you with your formal complaint. This kind of systemic bias is exactly what we work to combat. Marcus nodded slowly. I'd appreciate that, Ms. Walsh. Please call me Rebecca. And if I may say so, what you did here took incredible courage. Not just standing up for yourself, but doing it in a way that educated rather than just confronted. That's powerful. I'm tired of being powerful, Marcus admitted quietly. I'd rather just be able to travel without harassment. I know. But until we get to that world, we need people like you to speak up. Thank you. She handed him a business card, and Marcus slipped it into his wallet next to his federal badge. 2 different kinds of power. 2 different ways of navigating a system that wasn't built for people who looked like him. Patterson hadn't left. He stood a few feet away, looking like a man watching his career implode in real time. When Marcus finally turned to go, the head of security stepped into his path one more time. "Colonel Richardson, I know my apology doesn't mean much to you. But I need you to know that I'm going to do better. We're going to do better." Marcus looked at him for a long moment. "Mr. Patterson, I've heard that promise before. I've heard it after every high-profile incident, every viral video, every national conversation about racial bias in law enforcement and security. The promises sound good. They look good in press releases. But the pattern continues. This time will be different," Patterson insisted. "Prove it." Marcus's voice was firm. "Don't tell me. Show me. Change your training. Change your protocols. Track your stops by demographic and make that data public. Create real accountability for officers who engage in racial profiling. And when you implement those changes, bring in people who look like me to verify that they're meaningful and not just performative." He started to walk away, then turned back one more time. "And Mr. Patterson? The next time this happens, because we both know there will be a next time, I hope the person who gets stopped has the right ID in their wallet. But more than that, I hope they don't need it. I hope that someday, being a human being with rights is ID enough." Marcus walked toward his gate, his legs surprisingly steady despite everything. The crowd parted for him, some people nodding, some reaching out to touch his arm in solidarity, some just staring with that mixture of awe and discomfort that comes from witnessing something that punctures the comfortable narratives we tell ourselves about fairness and justice. His flight was boarding when he arrived. The gate agent, who'd surely seen the commotion or heard about it through airport staff channels, simply smiled and said, "Welcome aboard, Mr. Richardson. We're glad you made it." He found his seat in first class, a small luxury he'd earned through years of travel, and finally allowed himself to breathe. His hands were shaking now that the adrenaline had fully drained away. He felt hollowed out, exhausted not just from this incident but from the accumulated weight of a lifetime of such incidents. A flight attendant approached. "Sir, can I get you anything?" "Just water, please." She returned with the water and a brief note scrawled on a napkin. "Thank you for your service, both today and every day. You made a difference." Ashley. Marcus folded the napkin carefully and tucked it into his pocket. Small moments of humanity, he thought. That's what we hold on to. As the plane lifted off, Marcus closed his eyes and thought about his nephews. He'd been planning to call them tonight, to tell them about his successful trip, his completed project, his moment of professional triumph. Now he'd have to tell them about this instead, to explain once again how the world works, how to navigate it, how to survive it. But maybe this time, he'd also tell them about the people who stood up. About Officer Hayes who admitted the problem. About Rebecca Walsh who offered help. About the elderly woman who stood beside him and the hundreds of witnesses who chose to see rather than look away. Maybe that was the real lesson, not that the system was broken, they already knew that, but that people could choose to challenge it, to speak up, to refuse to participate in injustice even when it was easier to stay silent. The plane leveled off, and Marcus opened his laptop. He had a presentation to prepare for tomorrow. Life, as it always did, continued forward. But something had shifted today, in that airport terminal, in front of those cameras. He'd shown his ID. But in doing so, he'd revealed something more important. The invisible tax that people of color pay every day just to exist in spaces others navigate without thought. He made visible what usually stays hidden. And while one confrontation wouldn't change the world, it was a crack in the facade, a moment of truth that couldn't be unseen. And sometimes, that's how change begins, not with grand gestures or sweeping reforms, but with one person, in one moment, refusing to accept that this is just how things are. Marcus opened a new document and began to write his formal complaint. It was going to be thorough, detailed, and undeniable. He'd learned in the military that you don't just identify problems, you propose solutions. So he wrote about implicit bias training that actually works, about accountability measures with teeth, about data transparency, about community oversight, about hiring practices that create security forces that actually look like the communities they serve. He wrote until his eyes grew heavy, until the words blurred on the screen. And when he finally saved the document and closed his laptop, Marcus allowed himself a small, weary smile. They tried to make him small today, to reduce him to a threat, a suspect, a problem to be managed. But he'd refused. He'd stood his ground, claimed his dignity, and used his voice. And tomorrow, he'd do the same thing all over again, not because he had a federal badge, but because he was a human being who deserved respect. That was the real ID that mattered. Not the one in his wallet, but the one carried in his heart, the unshakable knowledge of his own worth, his own humanity, his own right to exist in the world without justification. It shouldn't require a badge to be treated with dignity. But until the day came when it didn't, Marcus would keep showing his ID, and keep demanding that people see beyond it to the truth underneath. Marcus's story didn't end when that plane landed. The video of his confrontation went viral, reaching over 15 million views in the first 48 hours. News outlets picked it up. Congressional representatives called for hearings. And importantly, that airport implemented real changes, new training protocols, demographic tracking of security stops, and a civilian oversight board. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Marcus's story only had impact because of what was in his wallet. Because he had the right credentials, the right rank, the right level of authority to make people listen. What about everyone else? What about the thousands of people every single day who get stopped, questioned, harassed, and humiliated, who don't have a federal badge to make it stop? This is why I'm sharing this story with you. Not just to shock you or to get views, but to ask you a critical question. What are you going to do with this information? If this story made you uncomfortable, good. Sit with that discomfort. Ask yourself why it exists. Question your own assumptions about who looks suspicious and who looks safe. Notice your own biases, and then actively work to change them. If you witness something like this happening, speak up. You don't need to be a lawyer or an activist. You just need to be willing to say, "This doesn't seem right." Your voice matters. Your witness matters. Share this story, but don't stop there. Support organizations working to end racial profiling. Demand accountability from airports, law enforcement, and security agencies. Vote for policies and people who prioritize justice over comfort. And if you're in a position of authority, if you're the officer, the manager, the person who can actually change these systems, then do it. Don't wait for the next viral video. Act now. Subscribe to this channel if you want more stories that challenge the status quo and shine a light on injustice. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. And most importantly, let me know in the comments, have you witnessed or experienced something like this? What did you do? Marcus showed his ID and changed everything, for that moment. Now it's our turn to create lasting change. Will you?